Hey guys, welcome back to another one of my videos where I show you how to make delicious treats at home. Today I will share with you this awesome pistachio rolls recipe. Stay tuned and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Get ready and let's go. So first off, we are starting with the dough. So for this you'll need 250 grams of all-purpose flour, 10 grams of honey, 10 grams of fresh yeast, 5 grams of salt, 120 grams of all-fat milk, 30 grams of sugar, and finally 50 grams of butter. Now for the yeast, you can use dry instant yeast if you can't get this one. If so, you need to use half this quantity since dry yeast is basically evaporated fresh yeast. So the beginning of this is pretty standard and quite easy actually. All you have to do is put all the ingredients together in the bowl. That is, if you have a stand mixer that you can make this with. If you don't have one, you can give this a try by hand. Just know that you'll probably be needing this for up to 20 minutes or so. So you want to start kneading this on low speed for about 5 minutes until everything gets nicely homogeneous. And then after that, you can pop the speed up to a medium speed. So for this process, you actually need the hook attachment. After 15 minutes or so of kneading at a medium speed, you can check to see if it's ready. All you need to do is roll it up into a small ball and then simply stretch it out very gently. And as you can see, if it's transparent here and you can see the light coming through, then that means it's ready. Now that the dough is all ready, you want to take it out of the bowl and then just roll it with your hands on the work surface. The next step is actually going to help us for the following part, and that means that you want to shape the dough into a sort of square or rectangle with your hands. Then simply cover it with some cling wrap and keep adjusting the edges. If you have a rolling pin, just use it a bit to even out the edges and enhance the square or rectangular shape. And then simply place it on a tray or a plate and let it rest in the fridge overnight. You also want to make sure that your fridge is pretty cold, so that means around 4 to 8 degrees C maximum, because we need to make sure the dough doesn't rise and stays at the same level overnight. So for this next step, we will need to start by preparing some equipment. So we need a piece of parchment paper, as well as a piece of paper or cardboard, and that is simply to measure the butter. So I have written here the measurements I use for this application. Start by flouring the work surface and place the dough on it. You can also flour the top of the dough and your rolling pin, and the goal here is to stretch the dough out. While doing so, make sure it doesn't stick, so reach out to grab some more flour. So keep rolling the dough until you're pretty confident about its width, and to check if that's what you need, using the cardboard or paper, you can check for the dimensions. So your dough needs to be twice as large as your paper rectangle and be at the same width. This looks like it will do, so let's set that aside and move on to preparing the butter. So for this, you will need 150 grams of cold butter straight out of the fridge. So inside the parchment paper, start by tapping on the butter in order to spread it out. We are trying to achieve a piece of butter that is the same size as our measuring paper. So you can flip the butter to have the smooth side on top and take the measurements, so you can then adjust accordingly the parchment paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it here and then at the bottom as well to secure the butter inside. You want to make sure that you seal this extremely well so the butter doesn't come out of the frame. And when that's done, it is time to roll it out until we fill the whole frame. We now have an even sort of rectangular butter, and the idea is that we're going to take that and put it inside of the other dough. So always on a very floured work surface, you can grab the previously stretched dough and place the butter on the edges or on one of the edges while leaving a portion of the parchment paper. So then once it's on, remove the parchment paper and fold the dough on top of it. You can adjust it with your hands and then you can start rolling with a floured rolling pin. The goal here is to have a long dough that is approximately 3 millimeters thick. Remember, you need to be gentle when doing this rolling of the dough. You can now trim the edges to have even borders and preferably use a sharp knife at this stage. Now for the bookfold turn, while brushing the excess flour, you can grab a portion of the dough and fold it, and then fold the remaining dough until they meet in the middle. Always remember to keep that excess flour while brushing it. You can then take the side with no seam and fold it on top of the other one. And voila, the bookfold turn is done. You can adjust the edges of the dough very gently with your hands. And finally, you want to cover the dough with some cling wrap that you can apply tightly around it. Then place it on the tray or the plate, and it needs to go back to the fridge for approximately 30 minutes. So now you can take the dough out of the fridge and remove the cling wrap. You can repeat the rolling action and stretch the dough until it is 3 times as long as it is large, while keep adjusting it with your hands on each side. And now for the single turn, you can flip a third of the dough, then the other third over it. Always make sure to brush off the excess flour using a pastry brush. And once you're done, you can cover that again with some cling wrap and let it rest in the fridge for approximately 30 minutes. In the meantime, you can move along to making the pistachio cream. So for the pistachio filling, you will need half a beaten egg, 30 grams of soft butter, 15 grams of sugar, 30 grams of shredded pistachios, and 30 grams of almond powder. So start by putting the soft butter in a bowl and work it with a spatula until it's completely smooth. Add in the sugar and mix using a spatula. This part is called creaming the sugar. We're looking for a cream-like consistency, so you need to keep mixing. Then add in the egg and mix as well. Don't worry if it's all lumpy here, just add in the almond powder afterwards and keep mixing until basically it starts to look like a cream. Make sure that at this stage, however, you mix well until you have no lumps left at all. You can keep checking while mixing to see if the cream is starting to look homogeneous. Next up, you can add in the pistachios. These pistachios I have shredded using my mixer, but if you don't have that, you can use a sort of Ziploc bag and then just tap on it using a rolling pin until the pistachios are all crushed. The pistachios in this filling add in flavor as well as a chewy texture inside the pastry. And so once the cream starts to come together, you can cover it with cling wrap and set it aside at room temperature until we move on to the assembly part. Alright, so moving on, you can get the dough out of the fridge and put it on a perfectly flour work surface. You can also flour your rolling pin and the top of the dough. So we are going to start by rolling the dough in both directions this time. What we are trying to achieve here is a sort of rectangular or square that is 3 millimeters thick. It is also important to be very gentle with the dough while rolling it out. So what I'm doing here basically is that I reach for some of the flour on the side that I have in order to make sure the dough is not sticking underneath. You can also check with your fingers gently underneath to see if it's floured enough. If not, you can go back and grab some more. If, however, when you get the dough out of the fridge, you feel that it's resistant and doesn't roll easily, that means it's probably too cold to roll, and you can actually just leave it out for a few minutes at room temperature so you can roll it easier. You want to check at the edge of the dough for the thickness so you know when to stop and whether you need to keep going. So for this next part, we need the pistachio almond cream. We are also going to need some grated dark chocolate, and you can totally, of course, use some milk chocolate if you prefer that. So using a spoon, I simply put a little bit of cream on the dough, and then I just spread that with a spatula or a palette knife if you have that. While doing this, you want to make sure you leave out some space on the sides so when you roll, nothing comes out of the edges. You can then apply a thin layer of chocolate as well, and you can also spread that with your spatula to cover the whole surface evenly. And then start by rolling very gently the dough. Make sure you brush off the excess flour always, and you want to be very gentle here, of course, obviously, so we don't push the dough firmly, and in order to also maintain that lamination we've worked so hard to get. Once you're done, give the roll a last brush to remove the flour, then simply transfer it into a plate with some parchment paper on it and let it cool for 30 minutes. And now once the dough is out, using a bread knife, you can go ahead and cut the rolls. The first one you cut is going to be an offcut actually, since it won't be so even. And after that, you want to cut 3 centimeter width rolls. Make sure you don't use a normal knife because you might squish the lamination and lose these beautiful layers when baking. So place the rolls in an oven tray and surround them with some cake rings. This is actually optional and I will be doing 2 without them to compare the results. You can then prepare some egg yolk to use as egg wash. This will be applied on the edges of the rolls, and of course you can remove the rings to do this. Once all your rolls are egg washed, you can let them rise for an hour and a half or until they have expanded and the yeast has started its effect. You can then bake these at 180 degrees C or 360 F for 20 minutes or until golden brown. So here are our finished rolls. You can let them cool a little bit before unmolding, and as you can see, this is the result with the rings, and here is the one without them. So there is some opening near the seam, but they are still very yummy. So to finish the rolls, we will be making a sugar syrup to keep them moist and add some sweetness. So go ahead and mix some sugar and water in a pot over medium heat and bring that to a boil. Once that's done, pour the syrup in a container or a glass and let that cool a bit. Then using a pastry brush, you can apply a layer on top of each roll. And then simply repeat this step on all the remaining pastry. The final decoration step is sprinkling some grated chocolate on top of these rolls. And then we will simply do the same with the pistachios. Here you go guys, the pistachio rolls are all done. You can store these in the freezer up to 3 months and you can simply defrost overnight before serving. I hope you guys like this video. Let me know if you have any questions. You can also let me know in the comment section what recipes you want to see next. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be the first to see my next recipes. Thank you for watching, see you next week, and as always, bon appetit!